Julia. I'm a current sophomore studying natural resources. Concentration is the integrated resources, so self-designed natural resources, just what I tell people. And then I am a Rubenstein steward. And so, yeah, that is why I'm here helping facilitate this. So, yeah, we will just get started. James, since you were here first, I'll let you go first. But you just little brief introduction, how you got to where you are now, and just whatever you want to say about yourself, about your career. Take it off. Take it away.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. It's kind of an interesting time for me personally. I just recently started at the Fish and Wildlife Department in Vermont. So, but I have been in state government for almost 11 years now. So I was a Rubenstein grad, natural resources. I focused in the ecology tract. I think there were only two at the time. There might be three now. I think three kind of options. So that's a little different. But so I was in the natural resources, the resource ecology focus, and a lot of what I studied in my undergrad was wetland and stream ecology type work. So that's just kind of what I was interested in. So I was able to make room for that. An odd part about my time at UVM was I actually started out in civil and environmental engineering. Tried that out for a few years and realized wasn't super happy. So working with Professor Ginger, I was able to to transition and use some of my other courses to get into the natural resources, and that was my my happy place. So so that was wonderful experience. UVM really did set me up with a really good head start once graduating. And then when I did graduate, it was 2007. That was kind of sort of when the last recession was hitting. So, there's been a couple of interesting bumps in the road over the last couple of decades, obviously, with the pandemic being the most recent one. But so there was the housing bubble that hit. So the job market was a little odd, I'd say, when I was kind of getting into it. So there might be some similarities, but hopefully it's not as tough as it was back then. But so what I did was I did the internship and field the wildlife technician route, so seasonal positions, and I kind of I got my foot in the door doing shorebird work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it was an internship and it was paid. It wasn't paid very much, but they did provide housing, and so did a couple other my seasonal jobs, which I find one of the hardest things, out of school is you want to build up that experience, but um, the jobs are kind of tough to come by, and they often don't pay that well, and some of them are don't pay at all. So it's kind of have to get to weigh the like, okay, is this worth it in the short run to gain experience and then kind of get some name recognition. So anyway, that's the kind of route I took, and I know it's relatively common especially in the wildlife kind of world. It's not ideal, but it does offer a lot of opportunities, and oftentimes those are the most fun jobs. So you get that perk too. So those were some great jobs doing shorebird management. I was hiking on the beach every day. Counting chicks and tern colonies, and riding an ATV, like all the cool stuff. But after a couple of years of that, basically you sort of kind of get laid off every season. So so um, it was always kind of like looking for something a little bit more permanent, and in that came about in 2011 for me, where I landed a job at the Vermont Agency of Transportation, which, again, a little unusual. You don't think of it as a place to go looking for natural resources positions, but due to state and federal regulations, there's a huge need, because certain forms of parts of government are I mean, agency of transportation, roads, bridges, even the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and there's a very large budget. And one of the things that is a requirement for a federally funded program, much like the roads and bridges in Vermont, which are typically 80% federally funded, is you need to do NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act review for each of those. So there's the hook. So that's kind of why there's a whole environmental section in the Agency of Transportation, kind of leading to that. On top of the NEPA, there's also state state requirements for wetlands permitting, threatened endangered species permitting. So there's a lot of requirements that go along with a project to be successful that need to be done for everyone. So they have embedded staff that deal with that. So I started off as an environmental specialist focusing on the NEPA coordination. So that led from everything from natural resources to also cultural resources and environmental justice, all like the whole spectrum that NEPA would cover. So I'd say that was really important because it gave me a really broad kind of breadth of experience where I got to get to learn a lot about a lot of different types of specialties. So over the course of my years at Agency of Transportation, I eventually transitioned into a biologist position where I was doing wetland delineations, threatened and endangered species permitting and review, and I spent a lot of time on terrestrial wildlife connectivity, which was turned into kind of like my passion. I found something that I could do to kind of move the needle even further that maybe the state and federal environmental regulations might not require. So kind of going above and beyond in a way. And so I would help focus on different parts of the state's transportation network that could be improved to help for regional connectivity, specifically terrestrial wildlife. So, which is kind of um, it's it gets hard to think about because everybody sees a deer cross the road, but that's sure it's important. You don't want the deer to get hit. You don't want a person to get injured, but also you want genetic exchange over multiple generations. So we're talking about a bear, bobcat, lynx, some of these moose that can travel many miles over the course of several years. So you have to think in that context as well. But you also have to think outside of the geographical boundaries. So it was interesting. So I got to get in a lot of groups that kind of thought about this problem, pre-existing problem of severed habitat, where in Vermont's seen as a rural state. People come here to go to nature, but it's also pretty heavily fragmented, and there are connectivity issues. There's forest fragmentation issues, maybe one of our biggest environmental issues, and so got to work with a regional group. A lot of it was the Staying Connected initiative was a kind of an umbrella for land trusts, different government organizations, NGOs, and then that included from Vermont, other New England states, New York, and even the Eastern Canadian provinces. So we got to think and act on a Vermont scale, thinking about that global and regional context, which was really cool. So that got me out in the field doing wildlife camera studies to check for connectivity, to kind of field truth the models that were being developed to show where maybe hotspots were for terrestrial wildlife connectivity. A lot of really, really neat stuff that is kind of starting. It's like a relatively new field where transportation and ecology was a little bit more on the fringe even 10 years ago, but now has several conferences dedicated to it, for example. So that was really neat. It got me access to a lot of different players throughout the region, including in the Fish and Wildlife Department. So I was able to make contacts there regularly throughout my work. So that was great. And then I also got to do a lot of bat work because in that same time frame, for example, the northern long-eared bat and also the Indiana bat became listed both federally and state due to the white nose syndrome. So that also impacted federal and state-funded projects. So again, there's like a new regulatory hook that required more research. So it got us to, you know, allowed us to kind of to dig a little bit deeper into that. Where again, I feel like over the course of my career, I found that finding things that require, I've kind of gone on a path that has had requirements. So either, for example, threatened endangered species for the shorebirds, it's a requirement to make sure that people who are going to the beach are not going to be impacting habitat nesting. National Environmental Policy Act, again, required by federal law for federally funded projects. So kind of using those as, since they have to be done, using it as an in, I guess. So that was my in, and then I can expand from there and make contacts, do other fun projects. And so that's kind of how I took my path. And then a couple of years ago, I transitioned to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And I was by far the only environmental person there for a while because it was there's a federal funding program through the Department of Housing and Urban Development for community development and affordable housing projects. Again, federal program requires NEPA, so there's the hook again. So I took that path and learned a lot about HUD's approach to NEPA, which is different than the Federal Highway Administration's approach to NEPA. Same federal regulation, but kind of through a different lens, which was a great experience. The other part of the experience from that position was as an actual regulator. So before I was the one getting the permits, and in this role I was the one, signing off on the final document. So it was a really good experience to, to talk one-on-one with developers who have a very good project often, but there could be name your impact to a wetland, there could be contaminated soils, there could be noise issues that someone who's seeking affordable housing might not think about. But it's the job of NEPA is to think about a site for the end user. So it kind of gave me practice having some tough conversations with folks and making sure that the regulations were followed. So that was great, and that kind of teed me up for my current position, which is a brand new one in state government, in the Fish and Wildlife Department. So I do regulatory review for aquatic and riparian habitat, and it in the past had been kind of divvied up amongst different department staff, but there wasn't enough capacity. So eventually, the legislature and the governor were able to say, okay, we can try out a new position. So I've been in that a few months, kind of building it, which has been a lot of fun. Again, it's more on the regulatory review, but that's a requirement. So what I focus on is criteria 1F and 1E in Act 250. So the state land use law, which is also kind of those regulations are mirrored essentially in it's called Section 248, and that's for communication and power generation projects. So solar fields, wind turbines, cell phone towers, those kinds. So they're all looked at by multiple kind of subject matter experts, I guess is a phrase that people would use. So, and that includes historic preservation, includes wildlife. So I'm in the fish division. So I do riparian and aquatic, but folks will be looking at it for bear habitat, deer wintering habitat, threatened and endangered species. So, and then those comments from Fish and Wildlife Department are then typically integrated into someone's Act 250 permit. So that's my hook now. So, which has been a lot of fun to build it. But to be honest, I think ever since my UVM days, I've been dreaming about working at the Fish and Wildlife Department, and I finally kind of found my way. I took a different route. So, obviously I just went through that. I did do some graduate school work, but it was mostly in GIS, and I have a post-baccalaureate certificate. Over the years, I considered graduate school, but I just couldn't like pick one. I was like, is it wildlife? Is it, just general ecology? Is it um, um, public administration, GIS? Like, there's so many things. I just kind of kept working. So, but just for example, on my team alone in the department, there are 3 PhDs, which is incredible. So it's like people take very different routes to get, and they're doing different work than I am. There's no doubt. But anyway, so there's great diversity there. So it's interesting to see how kind of people, and their backgrounds got to be. So that's where I am now. And, I've been in state government 11 years, which is one of the interesting things when you start in government, especially state government, it's and you switch agencies or departments, you kind of keep all the stuff going on in the background, like your health benefits and even like your pension, like what you're paying into, your leave time. So it's almost like a giant company where you're just changing different jobs inside the company, but the background stays the same, which was it's been pretty neat because there are a lot of jobs in state government, and they're not you're not going to get rich, but you're gonna live. You're gonna be able to live in Vermont, and which is nice. So yeah, so I'm here. My wife also works in state government, and we have a 4-year-old daughter, and we're just kind of chugging along. So that's my background, but a lot of it started right from right from Rubenstein, and I'm so glad that I was there.
Well, thank you. I think that gave us a pretty good background. I hear some feedback. I don't really know where that's going. Oh, I probably because you're still unmuted, James, I think. Sorry. Teams is super finicky like that. Yeah, it's so. And anyways, Meryl, if you would like to go next, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure thing. Can you hear me? Is this good? Okay. Hi, everyone. Meryl Braconnier here. I graduated from UVM in 2020, so very, probably close to all of your ages. And let's see, I was not a Rubenstein grad. I went the unconventional route of doing an environmental sciences degree through the College of Arts and Sciences, which I don't even think that's an option anymore. But for some reason, they gave people 3 options to get the same degree. But I was really glad for that flexibility. I did it because I wanted to pursue a French minor and a chemistry minor. My concentration was ecological design, and I was in the nutrient cycling and ecological design lab with Dr. Eric Roy, and he was a great mentor. I did some, helped out on some soil science or soil sample processing, we'd say, grinding through the sieve. And I kept bringing up, hey, I really want to work with the landowners, see what their perspective is on the wetland restoration and the wetland conservation. So eventually he said, Meryl, I think you're interested in social sciences. I'm going to point you to someone who actually knows social sciences in the geography department. And he helped me apply for a summer grant to do research with Sherry Morris and Beverly Wemple. And it was the perfect project. Social dimensions of river conservation, exactly what I wanted to look into. And I ended up going out to the upper Missisquoi River Basin and connecting with landowners and farmers up there who lived along the Missisquoi and tributaries. And we interviewed them about, their experience with conservation practices, the Vermont required agricultural practices, and just their relationship with the river itself. And that project is really what led me to get the job that I have now, which is working as a conservation planner with the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts. It's VACD for short, and we partner with NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a federal agency, part of the USDA. And yeah, VACD wears many hats. We have, there's the administrative staff who manage everything. We have some specialist staff who do like GIS work or wetland visits and conservation. And then we also have tech staff like myself, and we are within the NRCS field offices across the state. So there's an NRCS field office in every zone. So I'm in the Northwest zone out of St. Albans. And the other part of it, so Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, as you can tell, is an association of the districts, conservation districts, which were created by in 1939, and they're delineated by county boundaries or watershed boundaries. And they run as nonprofits, non-regulatory, going out to farms and giving technical assistance, outreach, helping people connect with funding and materials and information. And the 14 conservation districts in Vermont make up VACD, or they create the board. And man, all this background information just to tell you that there's a lot of partnerships going on through VACD, and I work mainly on the NRCS side of things. So even though I'm not a federal employee, I do a lot of federal work because we have a partnership agreement or a memorandum of understanding. And so I also work with NEPA, doing the environmental evaluation to make sure that projects are complying with federal law. And the basis of our work, myself as a VACD conservation planner, and then my fellow NRCS soil conservationists, our work is to go out to farms okay, let me back up a step. I'm sorry. So many steps to this. So farms will come to us, or forest landowners will come to us looking for assistance. It's all voluntary. They usually know our name. They know that we have connection to Farm Bill funding or just to technical assistance. And once they put in that request for assistance, they get assigned a planner like myself. And then we go out to that farm, we get to know the landowner, we get to know their goals, what they're doing on their property. It could be anything from dairy farming to growing figs. I just got assigned a fig producer in Grand Isle to, doing beef or raising chickens, pigs, pasture pigs. So you get to know the farm, you get to know the landowner, and you provide them with technical assistance, and you help them get connected to financial assistance as they desire. So NRCS, providing that technical assistance, and then the financial assistance comes through with the Farm Bill programs, like the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, is our biggest one. And the whole purpose of that program is to help people address resource concerns on their land. So water quality concerns, soil health, or plant concerns with invasive species, or plant productivity in a forest stand. So there's a wide range of topics that I am supposed to have knowledge on. And so it definitely I was like, wow, I should have paid more attention in some of my classes. But no, I have great coworkers, people who have been here for maybe 5 years, all the way up to 15, 20 years working for NRCS. So you learn a lot through your coworkers. It's definitely what they say, a steep learning curve coming into the office. And there's a lot of trainings to go through, virtual, in-person, constant training opportunities, which I think is a major perk of the job. And what I also love is that it's supposed to be 50-50 field work and computer work. Doesn't always, work out that way. The winter's very heavy computer work, and the summer's heavier on the field work side. And within the NRCS offices, we haven't always had a good system for managing contracts and applications. So if someone wants to get paid for doing cover crop, or is interested in doing cover cropping to increase soil organic matter on their fields, or address compaction issues, or, help with a runoff issue from their annual cornfield and they want to start cover cropping, we have, through EQIP, they can apply to get funded to do that. And, that's a great financial incentive to a landowner to adopt a conservation practice. And the idea is that with, a year, 2, 3 years of getting funded to do the practice, then they will actually adopt it themselves, see the benefits on their land, and carry it forward with their management. But so they, apply for funding, and it's then on me as well to manage the application and manage the contract. So it's a good amount of, natural resource communication is a large part of the job, but then it's also contract management, which, when I applied to it, didn't necessarily foresee that happening, but I think it's great experience. But I know a lot of planners who have been here for they've been here for now 20 years, and they're overloaded with contract management because they're the most experienced people and they have the most clients, and you maintain the clients over the years, and you just have a lot of paperwork to get through, even though you really want to be out in the field, on the farm with the producer, talking to them and, getting to know their land. So I think that's the one downside of the job is just, they're figuring out a system to make it, ease up on the contract management, but it's slow changes in the federal government. I can tell you that. Okay. And I've probably been talking for now 10 minutes. Apologies. I think one other part I'd like to touch on. So as a partner employee, I have some flexibility and I also work on other projects. So not just NRCS projects. I work with UVM Extension on their yearly nutrient management course. So that is helping farmers update their nutrient management plans to comply with Vermont required agricultural practices. So that's another fun part. That class runs for 6 weeks. I work directly with the farmer and I've collected all their field information and, given them maps, setback maps for any manure spreading or that type of thing. So yeah, very, every day there's something new to do. Sometimes I'm working in GIS making maps. Other times I'm out in the field looking at soil health. Other times I'm doing an environmental evaluation to comply with federal law. So that's all I'll say for now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's super cool to have somebody here who's like a recent grad too, and like very like applicable to what a lot of our lives will look like in the near future. But yeah, thank you so much. John, if whenever you are ready, you can take it away.
Hi there. So my job, my current position is the program director at the Lake Champlain Community Sailing Center. And I hope I'm not, am I breaking up? I feel like I am, but that's probably just me. So I've had this position very recently. I became the program director only for about a month. And but I've been at the sailing center for 4 years as the office manager, and my route here to this particular job has been very circuitous. I would venture to say it's really a terrific job, and I'm very excited to be in it. I'm just learning all about it, but the fact of the matter is that the sailing center, for those of you who don't know, we're right there on the shores of the lake, and we've really been growing over the years. And we're all about lake stewardship and responsible use, recreational use of the lake. We primarily have sailboats as the sailing center, but also paddlecraft. We do rentals. We have adult learning and as well as educational programs, which are sort of a real kind of cornerstone of what we do. And so as program director now, I'm much more involved as the office manager, I helped everyone, but now I'm really involved with the programs. And right now I'm working on floating classrooms, which is a huge fourth and fifth grade, essentially fourth and fifth graders from all over. We bring into the sailing center, and they sail, and then they do on land ecology lessons, experiential sort of STEM lessons of all sorts. You know, we have a lot of curriculum, and so it's a really an amazing thing to get the kids, even third graders, third, fourth, fifth graders out as a field trip, and they get to actually sail, but also learn about science, learn about the lake, and so that part of my job is great. So my quick route, which isn't very quick, but I was actually, as an undergrad, well, pre-undergrad, I was a biology major. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I was very good at. And as a graduating senior, I was, you know, I was set to do it. I went to SUNY Albany. I got my undergraduate degree there, and joined as a biology major. And the advisor told me, in some ways, this was an awful thing, and in some ways, it sent my life in a very different direction. That I should just skip over the first year of biology, as you would, because I had that basically. So I jumped right into sophomore bio, and I was completely lost. And you know, as you can imagine, as 18 years old, it was like life shaking, because I truly didn't know what to do. I literally couldn't do it. And it was all I had wanted to do for years. And so I dropped it. And suddenly here I am, and I didn't know what to do. I quite literally just stuck my finger in the course book to pick up courses, and I hit on theater. And it turns out that that's kind of what I should have been doing. And I became a theater major. I was both an acting and directing major and a theater tech major. So a complete left turn. That's what my degree was, in acting, directing, and almost a double major in tech. So then I moved to New York City and became a professional actor for almost 15 years. While I was doing that, I traveled all over the country, in New York City, out of New York City, toured, did everything. But I was based in New York. And as many of you may know, the professional acting world is difficult. So I was doing other things to make money, from theater tech, which I had done, to waiting tables, of course, as every actor does. And also some temp work and things like that. I ended up going to graduate school in after about 8 years, and got my MFA actually at the University of Alabama, through the university, but actually at the Alabama Shakespeare Festival. So I got my MFA in classical acting, and sort of kept doing what I was doing. I was acting, directing, and then at one point, it became difficult to I couldn't get insurance and this, that, and the other. So I was waiting tables at a restaurant, and a management position came up, and so I took it. And then for the next 10 years, I was a manager there at a very, very well-known restaurant in New York City. And that was the thing that sort of shaped kind of most of what was next in a lot of ways. But in 2005, my wife and I actually founded Vermont Shakespeare Festival up here, even though we were in New York City. As I'm telling you, it's very circuitous. And her parents were up here, her family's up here. So we started in the summers while I was managing this restaurant. We would come up and we would do outdoor Shakespeare. Maybe some of you have seen it. We've been around for many years now, and we actually were at the University of Vermont in residence for about 4 years. there. And I, in fact, during all this, just this last semester, I taught undergraduate acting at in the department at UVM. And I taught Shakespeare a few years before. I taught Shakespeare at St. Michael's College. And then about 8 years ago, we moved up permanently up here, partly because of the theater company. And also we wanted to raise our son in Vermont as opposed to New York City. So as you can imagine, that was a good choice. And so I started I was managing an audiologist's office for a couple of years. Then I was back managing a restaurant for a couple of years. I delivered mail for about a year and a half. I was a mailman. And then finally office manager here at the Community Sailing Center. So I don't think there could be a more circuitous route to get to become program director at the Community Sailing Center, because I didn't know how to sail when I took the job. I took it because management, office management and customer service is a huge part of the job. And but also the outdoors, and the education. I mean, we have summer camps, huge summer camps. It's 600 kids come through every year. And that just being right on the lake and being a part of this is pretty amazing. I even get to use some of my acting skills. I started a pirates camp. So I'm known as Graybeard, and I teach kids how to fight with swords and become a real pirate. And then they actually sail, and they're quite literally learning how to be a pirate. And so it's pretty amazing. But yeah, so it's what I just love, the idea that you have no idea what you're going to be doing many times, right? You absolutely, I know I was going to be a biology major, and that's what I was going to do. And, took some left turns, but every bit of my experiences has kind of strangely led me into this particular position. All the teaching that I've done, all the education, my biology background, my, just in general, all the office management and the management, all of your experiences can help you. And never ever be afraid to just do something that maybe because you love it, or maybe because it sounds interesting, or you're going to learn something new. That's definitely been that's definitely the thing that's been keeping me going. So that's my spiel.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting to listen to. So now we're gonna start kicking off with some questions. I have one to kick it off with, but anybody in the audience or anybody is welcome to shoot any questions in the chat, and we'll prioritize questions. But if those questions in the chat, but if none come in, we have some ready to go. So to kick it off, and anybody can answer, what is your favorite part about being in natural resources related fields? And along with that, what tips or pieces of advice do you have for current students? Whoever wants to go as well.
I can jump in. I'd say kind of sticking it out over the years in a field that's very competitive it can be tough at times, but it's been worth it. Kind of breaking it out into chunks where it could take 2, 3, 4 years to kind of figure out and work towards your next step. Kind of knowing eventually you're going to hope you're going to get there, but realizing it once you kind of get through that. So now that I've kind of had to do that a few times as I kind of transition, like thinking back, like, yeah, that was yeah, it was worth it, because it was tough, but you know, you stuck through it, and then now you can be in a role in a field, you know, hopefully, you know, hoping it all works out, that gives you fulfillment that you don't have to find elsewhere. So you could be doing a job that, you know, is maybe not your passion. So you might want to be focusing on your volunteering and your so like it's kind of the vocation versus advocation kind of scenario. So it's been nice getting that fulfillment, which kind of makes up for a lot of the hard work and, you know, lack of jobs and all that, like all the tough decisions you have to make over the years. But having that fulfillment makes it kind of all worth it. And then the other one, I will say, is, you know, it is, you know, getting outside. So there's a lot of these jobs have at least some component of being outside, which I think is key for them. I'm sure for a lot of folks in all the programs at UVM. So that helps a lot, because it really does break it up. But yeah, anyway, so that's what I like about it. But I know, and there's in terms of advice, I don't know. I think just it's hard to tell right now, but the field positions and the seasonal positions, again, it was a little bit tough, because you were unsure each couple of months what you were looking at, but it did kind of get the name out there, and it did, you know, build up the resume and all that. And so it ended up being worth it, even if it did feel like, oh, is there an end in sight? Like, what's the next step? So anyway, but
Yeah, I I didn't realize how competitive environmental fields were going into undergrad. So that's like, it's good to know. Being tenacious is definitely seems like it is a key factor. Meryl, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'd say I'd second the being outside part as one of the perks of the job for working in natural resources. It's great to, you know, get your hands dirty and do something that's more hands-on. I really like that part of it. I'd say almost even more than that, I love being connected with all the different environmental organizations that work in Vermont. So we often have trainings or conferences where there's people from Lake Champlain Basin Program and from the Missisquoi River Basin Association and from like small invasive treatment companies that you never would have heard of. So I think it's great to know that there's a lot of different nonprofits or, you know, just like private companies or different federal, state agencies that are all working towards the same goal of improving Vermont water quality and, you know, getting, there was just a riparian restoration practitioners meeting last week. And I was so inspired by all the people who were presenting and who were present to ask questions. And it's just, there's a world of people out there who have a lot of experience and who all have their own skill set, and that's been the most rewarding part of this work so far. For advice, I guess, I mean, it's like any, even in a class, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. That's something that I've, you know, been working on, just always asking questions. There's, you know, never a stupid question, as they say. And yeah, I think also, if you can get a taste of different positions, I'm at the beginning of my career, and now I'm getting to a point. I've been at this position for 2 years, and I know that it's time for me to, you know, either go back to grad school or find another job so I can get a diverse experience and see what really works for me. So seasonal work can be hard to come by, as James has enlightened us to, or to, you know, keep finding once the season ends. But I kind of regret that I didn't have more time to do those completely field-based positions and get a taste of like sort of different work.
Very cool. Okay, thank you. We have 2 questions in the chat. I'm just going to go in the order that they were sent in. The first one is, I'm a natural resources major now, but I want to work in marine conservation slash policy. Will being a natural resources major give me some knowledge or baseline for this area?
I'll answer, I guess. I don't know that much about marine conservation or ecology. I do have a friend who is a senior at UVM who created her own concentration that was focused on marine work, and she's actually going to do a position this summer working, I think, on the shores of New Hampshire or Maine, somewhere out there in shoals, might be Maine, doing like intense marine work. I'm not sure if Vermont or UVM has great resources to support marine studies, but you can make it happen if my friend's any indication of that. And I think natural resource work applies to any ecosystem. The nutrient cycling knowledge, the chemical knowledge, biological knowledge, it can apply to any system, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off what Meryl's saying, and as long as you have that baseline, I'd say look for jobs that they need people with flexibility. They need boots on the ground, and then you can kind of build it that way, because I studied natural resources, but I did not study coastal nesting shorebirds. But I ended up doing that for 4 years and kind of developed an expertise there that I built. So I'd say, yeah, definitely. And I have my UVM college roommate. Yeah, he studied biology and ended up going to grad school for marine biology, and has kind of been on that trajectory for a long time, and ended up studying corals all over the coolest places on earth, like from Hawaii to the Caribbean and all that. And, he had a biology degree from UVM, so there's definitely a conduit there.
Can I add a little something? As your in-house academic advisor on this chat, my name is Brittany Laveau. I use she, her pronouns. I'm academic advisor for Rubenstein. Halamida, there are actual marine science courses that UVM offers. They're alternate years, and I believe that this fall there is one. I don't recall what the prerequisites are, but that's not the only one either. So just keep an eye out while you're here. And I know we're getting close to the hour, but John, I am curious how that question, what your perspective on that question is working at the Sailing Center. Do you think that being a natural resource major would help with the folks that you work with at the Sailing Center or connected to?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, I think almost from a larger perspective, what everyone was talking about, that sometimes if you're focused on that, you're going to end up having to go to to the place that you need to go, right? And so if it's marine, then it's different than the lake, right? And so you'll end up probably having to go coastal in some way, I would say. And this is not knowing as much about the specifics of these fields, but I will say that it sort of piggybacking kind of on the last question as well. Also, you have to be flexible, like James was saying. I mean, when you're especially when you're young, especially when you're coming out of undergrad, that's the time to be able to travel if you can. That's the time when you should take those jobs that you won't be able to take in 10 years. And so, if that means you got to go to the West Coast or the we're closer to this coast. So I think that in that sense, anything though, I think anything can help you connect to one job or another. And I think that's the other big lesson. Like you have no idea really what where your path is going to lead you. So, but you want to, just as James was saying, and we're saying, the water is water for sure. I mean, that's part of it, and we're very lucky to be here where we are. But I've diverged off the path, just like my career. So I'm sorry, but I think that, I think you get the gist. So yeah, we have, sorry, I guess the point too is that we have such connection to the STEM and the science classes and the younger generation in that educational side. So it's maybe less. I mean, we work with Sea Grant. We have a great camp, women in we changed the name, Women in Science and Sailing. So they spend half the day. It's a day camp. They spend half the day with Sea Grant working with them, and then they come sailing for the second half. They learn how to sail. So they're even at a sailing center. I mean that it's a useful vocation.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you, Helamita, for the question. Laszlo asks, for those of you who are versed in it, how has GIS knowledge helped you in the environmental world? How useful / needed is it in terms of employment? I'm thinking about a GIS minor. So I guess, James, you mentioned doing a little bit of GIS work. If you want.
Sure, I can kick it off. I bet other folks are using it as well. I'd say at this point, it's in natural resource. It's integrated in some form in kind of in ecology jobs. So for my job, for example, when I'm doing regulatory review for name your development project, the first thing I do is I fire up some type of mapping program, whether that's a GIS software or even just online, atlas that's web-based. Just the ANR has a natural resource atlas that is a treasure trove of information. And that includes, floodplains, wetlands, teeny species, but it also includes LiDAR. So you can, and then different types of imagery. So the amount of work that I can do remotely is unbelievable compared to it was 10, 15 years ago. So the need for me to do field inspections is a lot lower, which I know as much as I'd love to go out in the field, I also can't. So I think instead of me getting out in the field less, what really was happening probably was less impacts were being identified, and things weren't being seen, and now we can see through the trees literally. So it's I'd say it's incredibly important to have some level. A lot of it has been learned on the job. I did take some undergraduate courses and I did take graduate courses, but it definitely helped. But I think there's, in some fields, it's almost it's more or less like some level of proficiency is required in a way. But you can still learn on it, so I wouldn't be scared if you didn't have it at all. But I think having some proficiency is definitely kind of becoming very normal as opposed to being like a bonus. So but I use it every day. I've used it in all my jobs since graduating 2007, and back then it was a little less. You'd see it less, and then I think since then UVM has kind of added it as more of a requirement. I don't know if it's a requirement or okay. Yeah, so I can't remember if it was a requirement back then or not, but definitely worth it because it's just integrated, which and it's kind of fun too. So it really it's something that I really like to do. But yeah, anyway, you can range and you can get a whole job. So you can work in the Vermont with VCGI, that's all they do is GIS 24 hours a day, which is really cool stuff. But yeah, I think it definitely is helpful, and you can even have a full career in it if you wanted.
Yeah, I'd second that. I use it at least once a week, if not every other day. And I only took the class that was like the one class required in my degree. So just having that proficiency definitely helped me get the job that I have now, because, in the job description, they say like you will be doing these tasks, and one of which, creating maps using ArcGIS Pro. So to be able to say that I had some knowledge of that was really helpful. So yeah, that being said, you don't necessarily need a minor in it to show that you are familiar with it and know how to use it. But if you really like it, then why not why not get even more knowledge on it? Because then you can be a real asset to your team. Definitely, the older generation is now adopting it, people who didn't have the chance to learn it in school. So we actually have GIS specialists on staff. There are 2 or 3 of those, and that is their whole job, is working in GIS and creating scripts for us to, easily create maps and make determinations. And yeah, I go to A&R Atlas to prepare for site visits, and I go into GIS and create field maps and field stacking maps for manure waste, and environmental concern maps to show the endangered species or the waterways and wetlands. So it's very versatile, and I think it's a lot of fun. I recommend.
Cool. So we have 4 minutes left. Brittany, should we do another question, or and
I've been sort of timing how long every question takes for folks to answer, and it usually is about 5 minutes. So if it's a quick question, I have a maybe quick one that we can wrap it up with, and it is, how has the pandemic affected your job or job search?
I'm happy to kick that off too. So I started my new job a few months ago. Before that, I had started the position at, I was doing the HUD work right before the pandemic hit. And so I had a little bit of time in the office when it was normal for state workers to be in the office most days of the week. Teleworking was an option, but it wasn't used very much. So I only had a little bit of time before we went full remote, or basically overnight. And I would say that did affect my ability to have kind of more general connections with coworkers in a way that I was able to do in past jobs. So I definitely felt like it was harder, and it had to be more intentional about it. Where when you're in an office setting, you could, just pop your head over the wall and ask a random question, or you go walk and get a coffee, and then you learn about someone's life outside of work a little bit. But you don't always have time for that because you have a meeting you set up in Teams. You go that hour, you spend the whole hour on the topic. You don't necessarily talk about human things. So I'd say that has been definitely been an impact. And I'm fully remote now, but I do plan to go back at partially. But it's going to be a little bit different now. But I'd say over the course of my career, making those connections and having those like extra conversations, even going on a site visit, traveling with somebody, spending an hour talking about anything, and then you have that connection, and then you kind of build on that, and you build on that and build on that, and that really does help when then all of a sudden when a job does come up, that person might think of you, or or even say, hey, this job's opening up, I heard about this, or it is those little casual conversations. They're just harder to come by, and making those connections are harder. It's not impossible, but it's just something you need to be more intentional about, especially when you're at the beginning of your career. Getting that recognition, from the beginning is hard. So, and again, and there are ways around it. It's just kind of like being more intentional, like setting up more meetings with whoever your boss is at the time. Just do, anyway. But it did make it more difficult. But I think we're in the last couple of years we've learned how to soften those edges a bit. So just something to keep in mind. But I'd say that was the biggest impact.
I just want to say, I think a huge, this is, I know we're about to run out of time, but staffing for everyone is a nightmare right now. The world has changed a lot. And we're having a really hard time finding our waterfront staff, our waterfront coordinators and our sailing instructors. It was tough last year, but this year it's even tougher. And I don't even know how to explain it all. And everybody knows, right, that this job market being what it is. And so everybody's having to shift. And I think from a financial standpoint, everyone, organizations are having to really look at different things. And it's, in some ways it's like you can't find the staff. And in other ways, it's really affecting bottom lines, and people are having to raise wages and to come up with, benefits packages and things like that. So, I'm not even sure what it would be like, coming out of undergrad in this kind of situation. I think in some ways it's great because there's a good, there's more opportunity, and in other ways, it's just so different that you don't want to be changing jobs, but if that's, like I said earlier, if that's what your path is going to be, commit to it. But you're just going to have to, we're going to have to roll with it. We all still have to be flexible. And I think that's really nothing is going to change for a long time in that regard.
And I know we're out of time, but I'll just say I entered this job during the pandemic, and I've been here ever since. So COVID has really, it's characterized my work for the past 2 years. And everything that John and James have said, it definitely made it harder to have those direct connections. You do have to be intentional about reaching out to people and getting to know them. And just, I'm glad that I had the ability to be outside with coworkers when things were bad. And it thankfully eased up during the summer too. So, mask on, mask off, things have shifted a lot over the past 2 years. So there have been moments for team bonding, but it has definitely made things a little more challenging. And yeah, very reliant on Teams and making virtual meetings. So I don't know if that's a hopeful way to end, but yeah, there we go.
I'd say I think you've had to do a lot of UVM, right, with Teams and online, and so that you're going to have a head start there because everybody had to learn this world overnight. And we're talking people who have been in my world, in government for 40 years and, still handwrite everything like that kind of. So, but all of a sudden they know how to use Teams. So it's going to be, there is a lot of advantage to that. And I think you will be kind of hitting the ground running compared to a lot of people were a couple years ago. So.
Yeah, I taught an acting class at UVM via Teams, just so you know. That was pretty interesting. It was actually one of the first in-person classes, but everyone had a mask on. So try and have an acting class with masks on. But you're absolutely right. I think it's changed. It's made people more connected in a different way. That's the flip side to it, James. And hit the ground running. It's a new world, different world. So get out there. Get outside.
Well, thank you all so much. I think, John, you ended that on quite a positive note. Really appreciate your time with us this evening, and it has been so wonderful and amazing and inspiring to hear all of your personal pathways. And we thank you, and I'm sure the audience thanks you, and future watchers will thank you as well. We'll be putting this on our YouTube channel for prospective students and current students. So thank you. And we'll follow up with you via email with another thank you from the whole student leadership team in a few days.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Good luck, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.